I'm John Wilker, the organizer of 360 IDEV. I hope you enjoy this session recording, but first I wanted to mention one thing. We've served the community since 2009, and over the past few years we've had to take on debt in an effort to keep the conference alive. After several unforeseen challenges, not the least of which is a pandemic of indefinite duration, we've had to make the hard choice to end the conference as we're now facing over $100,000 in debt. As a result of requests from the community of how they can help, we've created a GoFundMe campaign. If you're inclined and able, please consider donating to help keep 360 IDEV going. The QR code after this will link you to the campaign. Thank you. Enjoy the recording.
This is also the first time I've worn pants in a while, so even more fun. They fit though, so yay. Okay, so welcome to IDEV. This is a little bit late, but better late than never, so we're good. So a couple months ago, John asked me, I think he said, I have a crazy idea. Do you want to keynote IDEV? And I instantly knew what I wanted to do, but it took me a while to agree to do the talk because when he asked if I was interested, I knew instantly I knew this is the talk I wanted to do, but the only problem was I did not know if I could give this talk without it being a real bummer. And so it took me a few weeks before I finally emailed him again and said, all right, I can do this. I can do this talk and it will not be depressing. So fingers crossed this is not depressing. So I've had this talk in my head for a while. It's been refined mostly from working in the industry since 2006 and just thousands of conversations I've had with colleagues, friends, and people around the world during that time. So I started my own company called Second Gear in 2006. I started the day that I graduated college. I never really looked into working for anyone else. I didn't even take interviews after college because one, I was lazy, and two, I come from a family full of entrepreneurs. So my grandparents, my grandfather on both sides were both entrepreneurs. One was a home builder, one was an oil man. My dad was also a home builder. And so for me, the natural progression after college, especially being the first person to graduate college in my family, was to start my own company. And so when you start your own company, you have all of these big goals and ideals and things that you're going to accomplish. You're going to change the world. Everything that you make will be loved and used by everyone. And if you're lucky enough, you'll be rewarded financially for all of that at levels that you could never imagine. You'll be doing whatever Bezos and Zuckerberg are doing. That's the ideal. But I was no different. My goals, though, were filled with chasing a bunch of random ideas and these dreams. I started out by building software for the Mac. This was my first product that I shipped back in, looks like I shipped it on April 22nd, 2008. It was called Today. It was a Mac app that was designed to give you this daily glanceable view of your iCal, not even calendar, iCal task and events. And it was based off of a similar thing that Microsoft had done for Entourage that I really liked. And so I borrowed it and made my own version using the calendar store framework, which is no longer with us. I sold this for $25 a license, and it was pretty relatively successful. I wasn't gonna get rich off this thing, but I proved that I was in business and I was actually starting to make progress in these things. But then around 2008, this thing called the iPhone came out. You might have heard of it. It's kind of been life-changing for me and I think a lot of people. It not only changed my personal life, but it was also something that changed the trajectory, hard word, of my career. No longer was I this weird outsider who was writing this language called Objective-C that no one really understood. I was now part of this very small exclusive group of people that were able to build apps for this iPhone that was in almost everyone's pocket at the time. And so since 2008, I've basically jumped around between full-time employment and contracting. I've released some of my own products in that time to various levels of success. I built one of the first widely used notes apps for the iPad that's synced with Dropbox. It was called Elements. A lot of people still use it, or they don't still use it, but They used it at the time. Every now and then I find someone that still has an Elements folder in their Dropbox that all their stuff is in, which is kind of neat. And so some of these I'm very proud of. Some of them I'd like to forget I ever did or worked at, but everyone's got their own path. They've got their own story and with those sorts of things. And so I've worked for companies with a global audience in apps that are used by millions of people, and I've worked on stuff that has been used by just a handful of people in like a single country. Like I've kind of done a lot of different stuff. But no matter what the job was, I always seemed to let it define me or consume me. Like vacations were pushed aside because I needed to get the next release out, or I didn't want to miss out on any of those billable hours. When I was a contractor, this was one of the worst things is I would always have this running tally in my head of if I took 40 hours off for a week's vacation, I'm calculating in my head how much money I'm losing, which is just not ideal. So the concept of 9-to-5 work week for me has been non-existent. I'd spend many weekends just working to stay ahead or just working on my own little side hustle projects to eventually, hopefully not do any contracting. Relationships fell apart. I've lost friends. I lost relatives. My physical and mental health became a wreck many times. And I learned what burnout was pretty much annually, something that was completely new to me. So in 2009, I left a job that I'd been at for 7 years. I came in originally as a contractor in 2012, and I helped them finish the major release around when iOS 7 was coming out, so when we were switching from the skeuomorphic design over to the flat. And so I ended up staying and eventually taking over there and taking over the team and helping build it out further. And so when you work on a project for that long, you tend to become pretty heavily invested. In a lot of ways, that project was my baby. I nurtured it and grew it from being something that was back in like iOS 6 and iOS 7 and all in Objective-C into something that transitioned into like the flat design and was pretty much all Swift by the time I had left. I pushed for new features to be implemented. I fought with the other teams in the company to try to get things for our mobile team so that we could have the best experience we possibly could, and so that it would be as first class as anything they were doing on the web. When I left the project in 2019, the reason I left was the company decided that it was going to be shelved. They were going in a different direction, and it was one that I just did not agree with. And so I looked at that as kind of a reason to leave. But instantly, like what I thought was, all that time and effort I'd put in for 7 years, it was gone in a week. Like, I didn't give 2 weeks notice. I was just gone because I wasn't needed anymore. And so I knew I was burnt out after that, and I knew that I wasn't eager to jump into a job super quickly after that. And so I decided to take summer vacation and basically try to recharge and reevaluate what I wanted to do. Because in some cases, I wasn't even sure if I wanted to do this anymore. Like, I don't know if I wanted to be a programmer or even sit on a computer all day. And so what did my summer vacation look like? I did not go to the pool. I did not swim or anything. When I need to reevaluate and shut down and like figure out stuff, I shut my brain off and I basically just watched a lot of movies. So I did not touch a computer for about 6 weeks straight and just listened to my body, which was telling me that I needed to watch and rank all 9 Fast and Furious movies. Fast 5 is the best. So taking time away and watching Vin Diesel and his family, though, really helped me realize that it wasn't the actual like process of building stuff and like doing the software development that I was burnt out on. It was all that ancillary stuff that surrounds the actual practice of it. And that was what was taking a toll on me. And so it made me realize, like, I needed to change that. It also made me realize, like, having that time away, as silly as it sounds, just sitting and watching TV all day, was how much of life I was missing out on because I was always just go, 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 go. And I was missing out on family time, missing out on seeing friends. I had nephews back home that I hadn't seen as much. And so like having that time to reset and restore like really made that apparent to me. And from that, I was able to learn a few lessons, which is kind of what the point of this talk is. Code is ephemeral. When you tell someone you build software, most people assume that means you basically sit in front of a computer all day and write code. It's pretty true. Whether it's a Swift, Objective-C, JavaScript, or Pascal, or anybody got any COBOL developers in here? No, all right. All right, there we go, my man. The biggest part of the day-to-day job is converting the code and ideas that are bouncing around in your head into something that is actually implemented in the source code file. And we spend a lot of time and energy trying to write the best code we possibly can, whether it's through pair programming, like having code reviews with our team, or just continuing education, like coming here to IDEV every year, so that we can continue to grow as a developer and build better software going forward. Why do we go through all that effort, though? Like, the code is temporary. When I started my professional career, I was building with Objective-C, with the just newly introduced Objective-C 2.0 extensions, which gave us properties, property variable declarations, fast enumeration, that was a big one. And some of you may remember this, the Objective-C garbage collector. 2 out of 3 of those things were really good. A lot's changed since 2006 though, right? None of the code I wrote back then is still actively in use that I'm aware of. And I hope that's true, because it was really bad back then too. I'd be shocked if anything I wrote 5 years ago is still actively deployed. Like, a big part of this is obviously because the tech industry changes so much and it's moving very fast. Like, one of the biggest changes we've had, especially in the last, 7 years now, is the transition from Objective-C to Swift. Like, we were all learning this whole new language and basically having to adjust and adapt on the fly with that. Products evolve, languages evolve, and the technology evolves. Like, that's part of the job. Like, that's a big part of it. Similarly, jobs are ephemeral. Just like the code you write, there's very little chance the job that you have today is going to be the same one that you have when you're ready to retire. It's not 1957 anymore. Most people tend to stay at a job for a few years. I was seen as an outlier staying somewhere for 7 years. Like, people were like, why are you still there? I don't know. Why wouldn't I be? And so after a few years, you start looking around and trying to decide when it's time to look for the next thing. And the reason people want to leave jobs is there's a bunch of different reasons. There's newer, more exciting opportunities, like given the amount of change that happens in the industry, like you might want to jump onto the next wave. New management might come in that makes the current job seem less appealing. People don't quit jobs, they quit managers. I've learned that a few times. You might have been laid off or fired. I've learned that one a few times too. Or you're just burnt out and just over it and need a break. And there's other reasons too. I've worked at 3 different places in the last decade, and I've been laid off from each one of them. One of them this summer. Before I agreed to do this talk, by the way. Or after I agreed to do this talk, sorry. This talk is not based on that. It did shape a little bit of it though. The reasons varied on the layoffs, but each time it was a reminder that any job that you have is temporary, and it's just as temporary as the output that you generate. So, having said that, just because this stuff is temporary and it's not long-lasting as like something else in the world, that doesn't mean it's not important. Like, you're still participating in the evolution of technology and this industry. You're building a lot of amazing things, like that are on millions of people's phones and their computers and iPads. And that's really, like, that's exciting. Like, that's still exciting to me. Like, you're still growing also, like, as a developer and as a person, each one of these stops. So while they are temporary, that doesn't mean they're not important. But not every part of, like, the job is temporary. The relationships you make at it, that's the most important thing that you can take away from any job, more than any code that you learn, more than any, like, model view controller, MVVM, whatever like new technology thing you've implemented there, none of that matters compared to the relationships that you make. Whether you're working in an office, working remote, like you spend a large chunk of time each week with your teammates. These are people that, like, you know when their birthdays are, you know about their families, you know their weird nuances when writing code and they comment things enough. You know a lot about these folks. And so when I'm trying to hire for a new team, like one of the things I'm most interested in isn't necessarily like, can this person write code? Like that's important, but it's not the most important thing. The biggest thing to me is I want to make sure the person I'm working with is going to be nice to work with. Like I want to make sure that I'm not going to hire a jerk, because there's nothing that can make a job worse than working with people that are unpleasant. And that to me, like I said, that's more important to me than knowing if they can sort an array in 6 different ways on a whiteboard. Their desire to learn is also important. I can teach someone to sort that array 6 different ways if they've got a good attitude, if they're willing to learn, and if they're constantly trying to get better at their craft and as a human being. But how do you foster these relationships? This is something that I had to learn because in my 20s, I was a little bit more prickly than I am now. Anybody that knew me then could probably agree. And then I went to therapy and had some good bosses in the time. So how do you foster these relationships? Turns out it's pretty easy. Like these are things that most of us learned in primary school. Be kind, all right? Be helpful, and be aware. So the first 2 are pretty easy to understand. What do I mean though when I say be aware? Like that's the most important one, I think. You need to recognize that the people on your team and your friends and colleagues are also human beings, and they have stuff going on outside of the job that is far more important than what is actually happening inside the building or inside Slack. And so we don't always exactly know what's going on in their head, but like most people can tell when someone's like a little bit off because something's bothering them. And being able to be aware of that and recognize that your teammate might need need some sort of assistance. They might need space, or they might just want to talk. Like knowing when to do that is one of the best skills that you can develop, and it will help build these relationships far more than being the best developer on your team or getting the best code reviews I found. So humans, we're not robots. I am not from Westworld. 4th season was really bad. Wow. But yeah, humans, we have feelings, we have emotions, we have things that go on outside of programming, and I feel like that is lost on this industry a lot of times. So what made me think of this? 2020 was really weird. This is my first time in person at IDEV since 2019. In the blink of an eye in 2020, the entire world seemed to shut down because this unknown virus was making its way through the world, and offices were shuttering. Everyone was learning how to work at home on Zoom and Slack, and we were not seeing our friends and family. Like we were having to learn about these new fangled phrases like social distancing and what masking is and all of this other stuff that was just, we weren't around in 1918. This was there's never been a pandemic in our time. 2020 IDEV was weird for me because I was giving a talk in my office at home over Zoom, and I don't know if the talk went well or not because I couldn't see anybody. And last year I wasn't here because the pandemic. And so that was me. I don't have a family. I don't have kids. There were people that have kids that were trying to balance having a job while their kids are at home doing trying to learn remotely, and you're trying to keep the kid from playing Minecraft or whatever it is instead of paying attention to the Zoom class. The entire world around us were caving in, but our employers still kind of expected us to keep going with what we were doing. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm someone that, when I'm super stressed, being able to focus on a single task at hand is very helpful to me. To me, it's this constant, safe reminder for me that even when the world is shattered around us, I can sit there in tunnel vision and build out this code and not have to worry about that for a little bit. But having said that, it takes its toll. After a while, the exhaustion builds up. like you're working more to fill the time because there's not really anything else to do because sports are gone and like you can't go out and do, like restaurants were closed. And you might even have gotten burnt out. So as bad as the year was for me, and I think almost everyone, it really helped solidify and reaffirm what was important and to adjust my own priorities. So when every day's full of confusion, death, and uncertainty, like closing out JIRA tickets, just, it doesn't matter. So I remember at my last job, it was earlier this year, I was mentoring a junior designer, and she had, her grandmother had died. And she told me about it during our one-on-one and that she was grieving, but the product manager was really on her to still complete her deadlines and get stuff done that they needed to present by the end of the week. And this was insane to me because one, she's obviously grieving, and two, she can't even go to the funeral because her grandmother's in Hong Kong and they were still closed off to the world. And so this was insane to me because like none of what we do mattered. So what I told her is like, take the time to grieve. The Keynote slides or whatever you're having to make for this project is not important. Like all of this stuff can last until the next week. Family, life, your personal life, your health always come above anything else that we're doing. Because especially for the jobs we've had, like we're building like little apps that are great and they're paying the bills and all those sorts of things, but they're not as important as those relationships. And so knowing that, this is my big thing. Your job can be just that. It can just be a job. Like it doesn't have to be your identity. It doesn't have to define your worth. Like it can be just a means to put food on the table and pay your bills. And once I realized this was something that was very like light bulb going off for me. It basically meant that like while I do work at home, and I've always worked at home, I don't take my work home with me anymore. Like when my day's done and I shut off my iMac, I don't think about what happened during the day. Like at work, I'm in a whole different world now. And so, like I keep harping on though, that doesn't mean you can't love what you do. Like you can care deeply about your output. Like I put in the best work I possibly can when I'm at work, but I don't think about it afterwards. Like it's gone. Like I told my one of the few places I was interviewing at recently was, I said literally all I want is to do good work and not think about this place after hours. I don't want to think about this place on nights and weekends. Like if you give me that, we're great. So how do you get to that point? Therapy helps. Find a good therapist. But if you spent your entire life being defined by what you do and like what output you have, it can be kind of daunting. Or you may not even have access to a therapist because mental health in this country is terrible. Like it's a nightmare to find a therapist. It took me a while to find a new one. But like most recovery and adjustments, the first step is actually like recognizing that there is a problem. Like, are you missing out on events with your friends and family? Are you not exercising as much as you used to because you have some pending deadline? Are your thoughts constantly consumed by work? Are you not able to focus on being present with your family or being present with your TV, watching whatever, the new Game of Thrones or something? These are the things I personally noticed. In hindsight, one of the most obvious examples for me of when I knew I had a problem was, it was a few years ago, and I was working on an app that was adding a new audio player feature to stream podcasts. And the product manager decided that he was not interested in making it so that the behavior when you disconnected your AirPods or your headphones would actually adjust the audio how the music and other podcast apps did, because it wasn't going to, quote, move the needle. And I was so invested in this app, and like I took this as like a personal affront to me, and I ended up spending the next 48 hours basically rage coding to implement these things on my own time. I didn't bill these hours just because I needed that to be in there for my own personal worth. And I don't regret building the code. I regret the circumstances that I did it in, because it was really good code, but my blood pressure was through the roof for like 2 days straight, and that was not ideal. And none of this, though, was apparent to me until I took that time off after that job and took that summer vacation. Like having that time to fully decompress and do a personal postmortem allowed me to kind of reevaluate what I was doing and see that I was way too invested and know that I needed to make some adjustments before I went to my next job. And so I knew for my next job, I needed to set up these new boundaries to prevent myself from being always on. And so some of those were pretty easy. I don't keep Slack on my phone. This is the easiest one. Like when I'm at work, I'm on my iMac and I'm present there. I don't need people sending me messages at 8 p.m. or on the weekends, because for me, that kind of stuff is just, it instantly sends me back to work. So just eliminating that from my life has been very eye-opening and great for me. But establishing these boundaries, that's hard, especially if you've been somewhere for a while and people are used to you not having those. Like, it's gonna be really hard to get buy-in from your manager, from your fellow teammates, if they're not on board with that. Like, if your coworkers and managers aren't on board for it, it might be impossible. Like, the only solution might be like finding another job or keep going the way you were, but I wouldn't recommend that one. To me, I look at a job now as something as, I've sold a company 40 hours of my week. Like, in exchange for that, I get salary and benefits, and any time outside of that allotment should be respected. That's my time, not theirs. So, if you're as extremely online as me, you've probably heard this new term lately called quiet quitting. It's been gaining steam for the last month or so online, and I think it started from this viral TikTok that came out sometime last month, where it explained that you're not exactly quitting your job. You're basically just opting out of this whole idea of going above and beyond at work. Like, you're doing the job still. To me, the phrase quiet quitting, though, is just, it's a terrible misnomer. Like, you're not quitting. The thing you're quitting is hustle culture. Like, you're not gonna make work your life anymore, because it shouldn't be. Like, you're doing exactly what you were paid to do. If the job expects you to go above and beyond that, you should be compensated for it. And readjusting those scales is very important to me at this point. One of the biggest things that I've changed in myself in the last few years, it came from the author John Green, who wrote the book Fault in Our Stars, which was a decent movie. He has a podcast with his brother Hank, and they just talk about different videos and all kinds of stuff. And I saw an article that was about something from that one of those podcasts on Lifehacker, and he was saying that most people have far too many opinions. Like, you have to have an opinion for everything, and they were trying to make it a goal to have far fewer, have fewer useless opinions. And I'm on Twitter and Hacker News. I see all of these opinions. They're everywhere. People got opinions on everything. And so having to learn to have fewer is kind of challenging. But to me, I always felt even if I didn't have an opinion on something, I had to come out and say make up an opinion on it. At work, in my personal life, someone would ask me something and I would have to on the spot have a thought about it. So to me, changing and making this change has been very apparent. I sent this to my previous boss because he heard me talk about this a lot. My go-to phrase has been, I don't care enough to have an opinion on this anymore, or at this time. What should the name of a field be for a JSON payload? Doesn't matter to me. I'm gonna parse it into a codable object anyway, so it can be whatever. I don't care, whatever works. Why should we build this feature instead of that? That's product's problem, not mine. Just tell me what you want me to build and I'll build it. So when there's things that I actually have opinions on, that's when I put, actually make them known. And what I found is by doing this, not only is it clearing my mind of all this other junk, but it's also making it so that the opinions that I do have, they matter, because people are oh, Justin actually cares about something. So it carries more weight than just me throwing out my thoughts on every single thing that might be out there. So how do we get to this point though? How do you create, you've got this, you want to get off this hustle culture thing. You want to get off this whole thing of making work your identity. How do you fill that gap though? Because it can be very easy for you to go fall back into the old habits of filling all of that time that you should be doing other things with work, because it's natural. For me, my hobby used to be, or my work used to be my hobby. And so I've spent a lot of time thinking about this. One thing I've done in the last few years is I've spent a lot of time learning Japanese. Why? I don't know, it seemed hard and fun. I was bored during the pandemic. Like most people were baking bread or watching Tiger King. I decided to learn hiragana and katakana. And it's fun to me because there's no OKRs or milestones that I have to achieve with this. Like I'm literally doing it at my own pace. I'm meeting interesting people. Like I've got a tutor that I've met online who I see each week. I can now read in different language. I've like conquered all of these weird characters as much as I can. This fall, or in December, I'm taking a test to kind of test my level on it just for fun. If I fail it, who cares? It's great. And when I don't feel like doing something stimulating like Japanese, I watch a comical amount of movies still, and a lot of pro wrestling. So if computers are fun to you still, and you still love programming, that's cool, that's great. I still love it too. This is especially what I discovered in 2019. I've also been working on this side project for 2 years now. That is entirely for me. I've got it on test flight for about 20 people, and I have no intentions of ever releasing it beyond that. It's literally for me to remember why I do this and what is fun without having to worry about like deadlines or having to target iOS 13 or whatever it might be. Like this is entirely for me. Not everything has to be this money-making venture, like an app that you sell to make a profit off of. Literally, I've put hundreds of hours in this thing over the years just because I can send my friends memes through iMessage. So what's the TLDR on this talk? Most of us decided to pursue this career for the love of building and creating things. It's important not to lose that. Burning yourself out in pursuit of that, though, is not the answer. It's not worth it. You get one life. Focus on what matters and make it the best you can. And hopefully be like this guy. Thank you. All right, you guys got another set of sessions. Am I taking questions? I don't know how this works. Does anyone have questions? No? Yes, no? All right. Rock and roll.